Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to another fun-filled edition of Soaplore. I am absolutely beside myself today. Not only are we the official gathering place for newbies, novices, and OG diehard fans of the golden age of prime time, we are lucky enough to sit in the presence of one of the funnest ladies I've ever met in my life, Ms. Laura Van Wormer. If that name rings a bell, it should, because she may or may not have written a couple books, about some shows you and I may or may not be huge fans of. So go ahead and pour yourself up something bubbly and bright and fill it to the brim, because this episode is so good. I have not flushed the format. We are absolutely still viewing and reviewing the Soapiest Sudsest Primetime storyline. However, I couldn't miss this opportunity to talk to this creative woman. Laura's career reads like a wish list for any writer and TV kid. From writing stories based on pictures out of Life magazine to walking the studios of our favorite primetime soap operas to create a sort of television genealogy. I guess that's the best way to put it, but there's just so much more there. If you've ever thought of being creative, this is the episode for you. Laura's written over a dozen novels, survived a devastating crash, and came back on the other side more creative, more determined, and more alive than ever. Join me as I chat with my new friend, Laura Van Wormer, author, editor, podcast producer, creator, and writer for the incredibly entertaining Class of 74. If you like soapy books and you like soap operas, which I know you do, otherwise you and I would never have met, check out Laura's podcast, The Class of 74. They're in season 2 now, and this is a serial soap about kids entering high school in 1971. This is my first ever radio soap opera, and there's just something that hits a little bit different about it. I guarantee you'll have a good time. So go ahead, settle in, pour yourself up something bubbly and bright as we jump into my conversation with the one and only Laura Van Wormer. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to an exciting exclusive episode of Soaplore. I'm your host, Jet, still viewing and reviewing the Soapiest Sudsest Primetime storylines. But today I have an icon, a living legend. I am beside myself with excitement. We have Laura Van Wormer on the show today. Did I pronounce your name correctly?
Absolutely, you did.
Van Wormer.
Dormer. It's Dutch.
Van Wormer. I like
Wormer.
that. Okay. Welcome to Soaplore, Laura.
Well, thank you, Jet. That beginning of the show when you start talking and you've got that amazing radio voice, and I'm sure people
Thank
do
you.
that. That's your gift, is that you're a storyteller and it just
I love
rolls off your tongue. It's been a long time since I've got to talk about these shows. Years and years, in fact. And I think you're doing something that is so terrific.
Thank you.
For the process of storytelling.
I'm excited for many reasons. Laura has written her companion books.
They were coffee table books because they had lots of pictures in them.
Okay. All right. She has written 3 of the most iconic, I'm just going to say it, coffee table books for our favorite shows, Knots Landing, Dallas, and Dynasty. But long before that, I read that your mom used to give you a little bit of a challenge sometimes. She cut a picture out of Life magazine and say, "Hey, Laura."
She would just literally tear it out right there in the kitchen and hand it to me. And say, Laura Eleanor, because she was from Texas.
Laura Eleanor.
Laura Eleanor, tell me what's going on in this picture. And I would make up a story. And it was a good thing because she sent me to piano lessons, ballet lessons, art lessons, singing lessons, choir practice. No, I absolutely bombed it all. Couldn't do any of it. And, she grew up in this little town of Jacksboro in Texas. And she grew up in the era of Joan Crawford at the movies.
Yes.
And that was her concept, the big shoulder pads, that's who she wanted to be. So she married the first executive from the East Coast that she ever met.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And so
how did they meet?
My God, she was in Nassau. She was on her first vacation out of Texas, besides going to Mexico, because all the kids like to go down there. And so her hubby went there and she dove in. She was in the swimming pool and my father dove on her. He was down from New York on vacation and he had been dating. He had a problem with lasting relationships. He was not the marrying sort. And, anyway, he got home and he sent her a train ticket and a train ticket to her aunt to be the chaperone to meet him in St. Louis for dinner.
God. Meet me in St. Louis. That's so awesome.
So she came up and that was the second time they met. And then they came up a third time. And the fourth time they came for dinner, he asked her to marry him.
Oh, wow.
And their fifth date was getting married in Jacksboro, Texas.
Wow.
Yeah. Well,
when you know, I guess. What else are you going to do?
Well, I always say this is that I had disastrous relationships for years. And it's like you learn how to have relationships from your parents. Well, somebody marries somebody on the fifth date and then moves across the country. These two, they weren't really, anyway, they got to know each other after they were married. And I'm very glad they did because they had me. And,
right.
And I grew up in this suburban town in Connecticut, which is the setting of this teenage soap opera that I write as a part of the class of 74. And,
absolutely.
Anyway, that's how I got there and to Connecticut. And everybody in Connecticut our fathers all commuted into New York in those days. And our mothers stayed home and made the house pretty and their kids pretty. And it was bizarre. Anybody who's seen the movie The Stepford Wives?
Yes.
With Catherine Wright. Well, that was shot in my hometown, Darien.
Oh, no way. So I've seen the one with
the sci-fi
Nicole Kidman.
Right. That was the remake.
Okay.
But it was based on the culture of Darien, Connecticut, where I grew up. That it was every successful executive's dream is to have these wives are starting to get into the women's movement. We got to do something.
Got to do something about that. So do you feel that your mom, were you a creative child before that? Do you think that she maybe tapped into that? No.
Absolutely. About the story thing, tell me a story, Laura, and reading. My grandmother was a librarian in Texas. And so my mom really believed in, everything was go to the library and look it up. But yeah, she got me started writing. Absolutely. No question. She died
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, it was sad, but she gave me so much. She just, oh my God, Jet, she was so beautiful. And then you understand my father when he saw her, because she likes me, because he was like a CPA,
Okay,
right,
yeah.
Right? He was an Eagle Scout, all these very straight-laced things. And my mother was, she wanted to be Joan Crawford. I mean, come on, let's get with the show here. And she gave me all of those gifts. And thank you, Mom. So she's very much on my mind. And then I had a stepmother later who, the main protagonist in the class of 74 is a 15-year-old named Cynthia. And Cynthia's mother's an English Canadian who was in London during World War II. And my stepmother really was there in World War II as a 19-year-old volunteer for the Red Cross.
Wow.
So there are all these things like Cynthia's mother only cooks in this skillet, this electric skillet, because she learned to cook with her roommates on a one-burner thing in London during the war. So everything she knows how to make is made in one pan.
That's interesting. She's on the episode I just listened to, she was about to make pork chops. This is where Mimi's going to stay with them. And I thought, I have pork chops. I just thought that. It's like, let me pull those out. That actually sounds good. And she did pull out the electric skillet. And I guess it's still early on, so I didn't realize that's going to be one of her things. Things.
Yeah, because as a kid, she ends up doing a report on recipes from World War II that you cook on one.
And we need those again now. That's very helpful now.
But anyway, the point is that I pulled a lot from my stepmother and my mother, because what happens in these podcasts, it's just like writing a novel in a certain way or creating characters for TV. It's the same thing. You look for what is right with the people you know. What makes them, like, why isn't Jet a crazy alcoholic housewife?
Or is she?
Right, her head. Oh, okay. Well, no, I can tell.
I'm joking.
I can tell a mile away. You've got kids who have a good home and talk to you. And you've got family that you still talk to. But you see what's right with people because there's so much wrong with people. And so in your characters, you need to identify what makes them tick, that makes them interesting, because they're going to have frailties. And of course, Cynthia's mother drinks like a fish and they smoke, because everybody smoked in 1971.
Was the age 16? That's what one of the kids...
Yeah.
The kid with the dad who's a professor was concerned that Cynthia was smoking. He goes, but you're not 16.
That's
and
right.
I'm gasping like, I'm sorry, it's 16?
Yeah, it was 16, right. Oh, wait till you get to the drinking episodes.
My gosh.
When they drive to New York State to buy beer with fake IDs. Oh, yeah.
It's so universal. I can't wait to talk about that. I have so many thoughts on that. On the just 3 episodes in, you've really tapped into that first day of school feeling, that just kind of navigating not only life, but
self-consciousness.
I feel 14 again. Yeah. Absolutely. I absolutely feel 14.
Oh, just wait till you get there when the first black student arrives. That happens in season 1.
I'm glad you fold that in. I wonder.
Because there was nobody.
Yeah.
Everybody looked like each other. Everybody was. The radical part was if you were Catholic and you're Protestant, there are 100 kinds of Protestants in our town, in Brighton. But there was the one Catholic church. And so that was a major thing. But this is all very historically correct. So when people want to know what was 1971 culturally, what was it like?
You got to be honest. You got to be authentic. Yeah.
It's a whole different world because Texas, oh my God, in 1971. I mean, it just, but this is what was exciting about the podcast, because the young people who start listening, they realize this is the beginning of the women's movement.
Yes.
Cynthia is the first generation who's told you can be whatever you want to be.
It's hard to wrap your mind around. It really is.
Nobody's mother worked.
No. And she's still a child. That's the whole thing. So they're pioneers, whether they want to be or not.
Yes. So it was an explosive period that anybody who's around between 60 and 70 years of age, it was suddenly, there's a world to be taken over and we need to fix it. Very different from the boomers. Like, let's go get the oil and get rich.
Yeah.
We came in and, are you ready for this? President Nixon was inventing. Richard Nixon invented the Environmental Protection Agency.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So he overnight became the enemy of everyone who lived in Texas because of the oil industry. Yeah.
I just think about how wild it still is. In 2026, I can only imagine
But it's good to know where we came from.
Absolutely.
So when this Environmental Protection Agency came up about air pollution and water pollution, and people have a right to be protected from industries that pollute the air you breathe, you're like, Nixon did this? And I want to say, yes, because that's what the Republican Party stood for. It was big, but you had to legislate it. And you had to get new technology to help these industries grow. And that's who we were. And these first guys who went out there, like Bill Gates and the computers and all of that, they're part of this generation. And I call us the liberation generation.
I like that.
Well, and
liberation generation.
There's a group that wants to do a podcast that does nothing but talk about that period. And Cast is becoming a history buff's favorite place to hang out because of how, like your kids. You got to be kidding. Being a teenager before cell phones and social media?
Yeah.
So different.
It's so different. I really want to be a Gen Xer really bad, but I was so influenced by they were just iconic to me. But millennials, especially the geriatrics, we're the zennials. So we understand what a typewriter is. We know what the Dewey Decimal System is, but we've also had a computer with us every single step of the way. So I literally missed that social media in high school by the skin of my teeth.
Yes, but still,
I'm so grateful I did though.
Right, and then you have the new technologies, unbelievable. Well, we didn't even have answering machines, Jet.
Oh God,
so
that is freeing.
If somebody didn't answer their phone, they could be dead on the floor in Paris. No one knew where they were. No one knew where the kids were. The teenagers are like, and as you get deeper into the series, you'll see that, well, isn't there any parental supervision?
Yeah.
No.
Well, the cigarette thing threw me. I thought, wait, what? That is crazy to me.
And as you go on, you meet other characters whose father runs the ad agency for these cigarette companies. And they haven't been banned yet, the cigarette ads.
Oh, wow.
They're in every magazine. You pick up Life magazine and every other ad is for cigarettes or liquor.
Without the label on the bottom that tells you from the Surgeon General, none of that. Oh, wow.
No, none of that. And that was a big advertising industry. And Brighton is a center for those executives in New York. They leave Madison Avenue and they come home. So when the women's movement starts up and some of these ads, the public outroar, it's like every mother in America flipped out over these Tipperillo ads which you'll see all these, but this is not a plot spoiler. It's just, this is what was going on. It's like all of a sudden these buses of housewives are going to Atlantic City to boycott Miss America because the major sponsors are doing these ads. I mean, all of it was exploiting women. And
I'll have to look that up.
You don't have to look it up. You just listen to the class of 74. You're going to learn it all because it is, it's that history about what happened. And you begin to understand, oh my God, that's why they all have emphysema. That's why my grandfather thinks the way he did, or my mother, or my mother.
All the ashtrays in cars. I remember that. There used to be ashtrays in all the doors and such.
Oh my God. Texas was a dry state in those days.
Oh.
Because
there
was such a liquor problem. You could bring liver to private clubs, but you couldn't get a drink in a restaurant or buy a 6-pack of beer anywhere.
That is crazy. You know what's funny? I didn't know, and I'm a full-grown adult, went to San Diego for a conference, went to Ralph's.
Beautiful.
Oh, God, I love San Diego. Love it. Went to Ralph's, and they had liquor in the grocery store, and I was like, oh my, what is this? You can't even buy it on Sunday here. You have to stop selling at 9:00 on Saturday night, and then you have to wait till Monday morning at 10.
Well, that's the way it was here.
Oh, okay.
Until this new whatever it is age that we're in. And you'll find that. You'll learn when the liquor store opens, when it closes, and when you get in the car and go down the thruway to New York State, where the drinking age is about to change in Connecticut. When it opens, it's 21, but it's coming the next month. So you're going to experience it with us.
All right. I like that. I love that.
But,
so this feels like a love letter to me as I listen to this. It's only 3 episodes in, but this definitely feels like a love letter.
Let me tell you why. When I was in high school, after my mother trained me with the Life magazine pictures, I wrote stories in high school. And we'd have like a keg party or something, secretly. I know they do that because my cousin Monty used to take me to the runway in Jacksboro, their little airport, and that's where everybody drank.
Oh, yeah.
And so when I would be at a party and I'd have a few, and then I'd say, okay, everybody, I'm going to read you a story I've written. And they'd all go, oh, God, Laura, no. But I was famous for doing that. So later, when I was in this car crash, which we'll come back and talk about, I lost my voice, sort of, in this ventilator, and I wasn't able to write my novels. I had published 14 novels when this car crash happened. Drunk driver, mind you, going the wrong way through a tunnel.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, boom.
Ugh.
And I couldn't write. And I had my 50th reunion at Darien High School, and I didn't want to go because my face had been kind of rearranged, and they were doing this big weekend, and I knew my voice was shot. That's why I have to speak through a microphone. And when I was there, Jet, I sat there and I thought, if I could just go up and say, everybody stop. I want to read you a story I've written. Right? Just like high school. And I came home and I was so sad. Because nobody could hear me at the reunion dinner because my voice doesn't carry. And my other half said, why didn't you write them a story and do it as a podcast? Then they can hear you. So immediately I thought, well, I could do a story. I can't write a novel, but I'll try writing a story. And maybe it'll be about high school. Maybe it'll be about our class. Except I'll make up a different, like when you write novels, you make up different, you use what's right with people, not what's wrong with people. You copy that. And so I started writing a story about the class of 74, which is my class. And I was going to do this limited thing, like I'd do 4 episodes. And then I would tell all my classmates and then they could listen to it. Well,
That's
what
amazing.
I didn't anticipate was that people would accidentally run into this podcast and say, what is this? It's like a teenage soap opera. So people who like serialized stories are like, oh, this is cool. You mean I come back every week and the story advances?
Yeah.
And I wasn't sure if I really wanted to do this forever. But after 25 episodes, the first season, I thought, you know what? This is what I want to do. This is what I want to do with my life. And I opened this Patreon group for the class of 74, and people started paying $5 a month to join just to come into the clubhouse and talk about the series, but more or less to talk about their own life experiences in high school. They're not all 70 years old. Somebody who's 35 who went to high school felt just as awkward as Cynthia did.
100%.
And they're 100%. Like, I had a big nose too. So I'm just writing down everything they're talking about because it's all fodder for the series, right?
Yes.
But it's grown into this thing. But now, let me go back to you about what my experience was with serialized storytelling that even made me prepared to do this. And that was working on the books with the creators of Dynasty, Dallas, and Knots Landing.
Absolutely. You lived in a lot of ways such a rich creative life. I would argue that most people who want to be a creative would say this is the dream life. So
location.
Completely
accidental.
It almost feels accidental, but it's like this was supposed to happen. Let's start with high school.
Right.
It's 1974. You've just graduated. Where does young Laura go after that?
The first year, I went to University of Arizona, where all people go who like to drink beer and sit around pools. Somebody told me, some friend of my parents, their kid was talking to me about the journalism program at University of Arizona. He was so adorable, this guy. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. And my grades were all right. But then I just announced, okay, I'm going to study journalism at University of Arizona. My guidance
That's very random.
My guidance counselor said, well, you're going to get accepted if you pay the tuition. All my relatives in Texas were so upset. They're like, why are you going to Arizona? And, I didn't know. I mean, I just wanted to go. And
yeah,
I dated this guy who rented a house out in the desert, had a jacuzzi and a pool, and we drank beer and we drove around and I wrote stories. And
so you never stopped writing stories
no.
this whole time you're still writing.
No.
Okay.
Well, we're going to get there. And those people are still my friends from that year. Awesome. Everybody I ever partied with is still my friends. Or they came back later in my life. And I realized that I was going nowhere at this school. And my parents came to visit me. And they're like, oh yeah, I always loaned Laura my car to go to Circle K to get a 6-pack every night. And my stepmother says, every night?
I know. Why would he say that? Well, sir, once a week.
Because she was an idiot. I think she was drunk at the time. Anyway, the drinking age was 19 down there, and all my friends drank down there, and they were all writers, but they grew up. And actually, some of them got sober. But we'll get to that. Okay. So I figured that I really was a mess. I needed to come home for a summer and take some classes at University of Connecticut. And, I took a film class and a writing class, and I liked it. And I met somebody, again, random. We went out and got bombed. She was from Westport, and she went to Syracuse University. And the tuition was so expensive. Her father said, if you transfer to UConn, I'll buy you a Camaro.
Oh, wow.
And she started talking about Syracuse because, there's a whole program there about television and radio and creative writing, the English department, right?
Sounds pretty perfect.
When I was looking at schools, I went there and I went to NYU, and my dad took me down to American University in Washington, D.C., where he spent a lot of time. And the Newhouse School, I thought, TV, that's because I have nothing to say as a writer. I haven't done anything in my life except drink and drive around. So I transferred to Syracuse, and I got completely snowed in for 2.5 years. I couldn't do anything but go. And my roommate, oh, thank God, Roz was a woman of color from St. Vincent's Island, and she was a pre-med student. I adored her, and she disciplined me. She goes, you've got to do your homework. So you drink your beer between 8 and 11, but, you've got...
yeah.
Suddenly I'm on the dean's list at Syracuse.
Oh, wow. And we're studying journalism there, or the film and TV?
Well, yeah, TV, radio. The degree was a public communications degree, Bachelor of Science. And they had a studio that was second to CBS News in New York. They turned out a lot of news people. So I wanted to write. There were these news series that started while I was in college. 8 is Enough and Dallas. This
that's right. That's right.
And I thought they were my favorite show. Actually, my favorite show was Policewoman with Angie Dickinson. But I had learned how to write TV scripts. I did independent study, and I wrote a script for Policewoman, and then I wrote one, a murder mystery series for radio.
So, Laura, before that, I know you mentioned you'd always written stories for your friends. Were you watching television at all during this time?
All the time.
Okay.
What do people do who drink? They watch TV. They don't.
Well, I mean, it's college. I don't know if you're just parked under a bridge somewhere or.
No. Well, that plays into all of this because it's good because your listeners, if you're a fan of serialized storytelling, of soap operas, of Knots Landing, Dallas, these fabulous series, which we'll get to.
Absolutely.
I think this is going to be like a 6-part series, don't you?
I think so.
The people who have a creative bent to their personalities, this
I think so.
ability to go into fantasy, it usually signals, it's been my experience, that there's an untapped creative side to these people.
I agree. I think a lot of my audience are budding artists. They're on the cusp. I think we've got a couple podcasters here. So
Painters,
I agree.
Writers,
Right.
a lot of writers, any creative thing. And it could be sewing, it could be fashion design, but they need to pay attention because you've got something there that wants to come out. And that's what pulls you into these stories, is because you never know what's going to happen. Well, guess what?
Right.
That's true about your own life.
It is. It definitely is.
And if anybody has learned anything, that education is the ability to learn something when you need to learn it.
Education is the ability to learn something when you need to learn it. That is brilliant. I don't think I've ever heard it put like that.
Like a young woman who wants to talk about podcasts. Do you go to the, podcasts are invented, but radio, trying to get into radio is impossible. But podcast, you just learned it.
I was called to it. I really believe that. It's like, I have to do this. I love it.
That's what every creative endeavor is. Anybody who writes or paints or sews or cooking is a huge creative art.
Absolutely.
And your audience, I guarantee you, everybody who likes, they're hooked into some sort of creativity. And that is what's so fun about serialized storytelling. And something in me recognized that in school. And when I graduated with my BS degree in, people say, yes, Lauren, the BS degree, in television, radio concentration in public communication, and a minor in English Lit. And I was writing, of course, stories too. I went to New York and I was going to interview for a job typing soap opera scripts. At all my
gosh. Now, were you a daytime? I imagine you're in class a lot.
No, I wasn't, but that was the only soap opera. That was the only TV production that was fiction in New York, were soap operas.
Okay. I did not know that.
Yeah.
I've learned through a little bit of bits and pieces, and I apologize for interrupting, getting excited. Some of the cast of Knots Landing, I think specifically Ted Shackelford, I believe.
Donna Mills, they started in New York.
In New York. Okay, they were on a couple other soaps.
They were on a soap opera, a daytime soap.
Awesome.
Donna was on something called Love is a Many Splendored Thing. And it was a new soap. And she and Leslie Charlson, who would go on to General Hospital.
Okay.
What was her name?
My mother-in-law loves General Hospital.
Yeah,
so I'm sure
she'll know Leslie Charlson. Well, guess what? Leslie Charlson's from my hometown.
Okay, it is a small world.
And
wow.
Cynthia, in my podcast, Cynthia has a wicked older sister who's on a soap opera.
Oh my gosh. Oh my
why
gosh.
Not?
Okay.
Because I know all that. I knew her brother, but Leslie Charlson was wonderful. I mean, she was terrific. So there was nothing wrong with her. But again, it all comes to play. Everything comes full circle in life. So I'm on my way to interview at this thing, to take the typing test at ABC. And I run into somebody who also graduated from Newhouse. And he tells me that the editor-in-chief of Doubleday is looking for a secretary. Now, immediately I think, Doubleday, Phyllis Whitney, Stephen King, William F. Buckley Jr., all the Sherlock Holmes stories, Arthur Conan Doyle, that was his publisher. it was like the Sears and Roebuck of fiction. So,
oh, wow.
I end up taking a detour, and this temp agency gave me the typing test for Doubleday so I could practice it.
God bless the temp agency.
So I went veering off to Doubleday, aced that typing test, and I got hired.
Nice.
Now, why did I want that job? Because, Jetta, I'm sitting in reception. And I'm waiting to go in.
You're in the house of creativity, though.
Right.
In my
and I'm
mind,
looking at these books, Taylor
Absolutely.
Caldwell, and just these incredibly big names. And Stephen King had been just discovered there from a query letter, and they had to loan him the bus fare from Maine to come down and talk to them about publishing a book called Carrie.
Don't even get me started on Carrie. Right. Iconic.
Okay. So I'm sitting there and I'm looking at all these books like Carrie, right? And in walks Jacqueline Onassis.
I read that in your bio. I had no idea that she was in publishing at all.
So what was her
role there?
She was
an editor.
That because, Jackie was of the era where women didn't work, except in the White House. She was the first lady, right? But Jackie had this background in journalism and photography and art and fashion. She knew all this stuff. Like one of the first books she did was with Diana Vreeland, who was the publisher of Vogue.
Oh my God.
But Jackie
I had no idea.
worked to create, the book was this big. It was a fashion book. Oh my God. Wow. It was Diana Vreeland's book. She couldn't write about fashion unless you could see what she was talking about.
Right.
So Jackie did these incredible books that had, the art was unbelievable. She signed up Michael Jackson for Moonwalk. And it was a book with all this art. She was Michael Jackson's editor.
We're talking about the former Mrs. Kennedy, right? I'm making sure that I'm keeping up. This is...
Yes, Jackie. She was She was a brilliant editor.
Wow.
And she had just arrived at Doubleday. And that's what I said. And in my head, I hear my mother, who's been dead now for many years, right? The one from Texas, I just remember her. She never got over the fact that JFK was killed in Texas. It broke.
Yes.
It broke. Man. And I heard her say, because she had such identification with Jackie and those two little children, left a widow, and my mother had two little kids. And I hear my mother saying, Laura Eleanor, pay attention to Mrs. Kennedy. Well, she was Mrs. Onassis then, but my mother, she was still Mrs. Kennedy. And I heard her say, you need to work here, Laura Eleanor. She knows all about stories. So I didn't work for Jackie, but I worked for the editor-in-chief, and she worked for the editor-in-chief of Doubleday. Right?
That is... Yes. What do you think that environment, like, what did that teach you about storytelling and polishing and imagery, things like that?
That editors are critical because authors are untrained creativity. And Jackie actually published a first novel that was about textile workers in Massachusetts. People write this down. It's called Call the Darkness Light.
Call the Darkness Light.
And I can't remember the author's name, but that was Jackie's first sort of non-visual book, that it was just the fiction, but it was the history that she loved. And she was the editor, and she was guiding this first-time novelist to shape the novel. She had bought it through an agent, a literary agent, but she sat down and she did her editorial notes where the story seemed to go off. That's what editors do. You'd be fabulous TV editor, story editor, because you would know where the story's going wrong. And editors are people who have read so much for so many years, they can help the author get to the story. And Stephen King's first editor was a guy named Walter Bradbury, and he was helping Stephen King how to harness his talent. and edit himself. And that's what I learned how to do at Doubleday. And
that's
I
awesome.
Worked on books. But what I ended up doing was I was so interested, I just naturally gravitated. I was promoted, to an editorial assistant, an associate editor, and then an editor. And I had
do you remember how long it took? How long it took before you were promoted?
Yeah, it went. Really, I worked 2.5 years as basically a year as a secretary, an executive secretary. So I worked with all of Sandy's authors, which was great. But then I got hired by another editor to work with her authors, but I was still a secretary basically because there were no word processors even in those days.
Oh my gosh.
Everything had to be done with carbon paper to keep a copy of the letters that you wrote. So I'm down there typing. And then I was promoted to editorial assistant. And then I was promoted to associate editor. And my specialty became entertainment-related books because that's really what I was interested in at that time. I knew I wasn't a literary writer. I knew I was an entertainment writer. And so, for example, we had a Barbra Streisand proposal that came in for another editor, but I saw a visual book. I mean, I learned a lot from Jackie.
Yes.
The Barbra Streisand fans want to see Barbara. They want to see pictures of her as well as reading her story. So I signed up the first book, James Spada. We did a book called Streisand, The Woman and the Legend. And
I like that.
The book was so long. I mean, the manuscript, we actually sold the mass market rights to pocketbooks, even though it was the trade paperback that flew off the shelves across the country. And the Book of the Month Club bought the paperback as a selection for Book of the Month Club.
Wow.
And so everybody's like, who is this editor down there? Where did this book come from? And they're like, oh, it's Crazy Laura. She's the TV movie star guru. She just signed up Janet Leigh to write her autobiography.
Okay, Janet, I know that name. Janet
She got
Leigh
murdered in the shower scene in Psycho and was the mother of a new star named Jamie Lee Curtis.
Oh my gosh.
Right.
Okay.
And Jamie Lee was writing the introduction to her mother's autobiography. You see how it all just steamrolls. Yes. And all of this is because my mother made sure I could type. And
tell a story.
Right. But I veered off from the soap opera, and I always wondered what would have happened had I gone and got that job at All My Children, because those were the kind of stories that I told. Well, let's fast forward. Doubleday signs up a book with the creators of Dynasty, Esther and Richard Shapiro. Now, who are they? Well, they both have master's degree in Victorian literature. Esther was a fan of
Victorian
Tolstoy.
literature.
Yeah. She had a master's degree in Tolstoy. That's what she did her thesis on. Richard did his thesis on Mark Twain. Now, what did these authors have in common? Magazines signed them up and published some chapters of their novels. And they would publish them and pay the author. And then people read it and became addicted to it. And they would buy the magazine for the next 3 chapters.
For the next chapter. Okay.
But
that is clever marketing.
But that was 3 months down the road. So these guys would walk the streets and people would say, oh my God, that Count Vronsky, he's got to get, that's the perfect person to seduce this woman from her marriage in Moscow. So he'd say, okay, because they got feedback.
Yes.
They got
that
feedback
audience there.
from
They're in the
their
clubhouse.
audience, and their novel, the course of the story changed.
Okay.
So
and
those novels,
would you say that's the difference between, I don't want to say, let's say a Stephen King and your work, where you are
right.
not so much in novels, you're more open, you think?
I was a novelist before, but for Esther and Richard Shapiro, who were closet novelists, but they went into TV, and Esther had children, so she got a job at ABC, and she produced this little series called Roots.
What? I didn't know that.
Yes, and that was published by who?
Doubleday. I didn't know that.
Doubleday, and his editor was right across from my chair, across from Sandy's office, the editor-in-chief.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
What was the buzz around the office with that? I can only imagine.
It was a labor of love, but fortunately, Lisa Drew, who was the editor, Alex Haley was like 14 years late with this manuscript.
Oh, man.
Because he started it, and it was like a rabbit hole. The research into that period of American history.
Without the internet. So that's
in the library. And he kept running out of money. And Lisa, thank God, she would go back to the publishing board and say, look, guys, this story, we've got to get Mr. Haley more money to finish this research, because that's the story. This novel is a nonfiction story in the making. So she had to do that. I think it was 11 years. She kept getting money for him. So let's say he was signed up for $5,000 to publish this novel that's 11 years late. And every year, Lisa's talking to the publishing board, asking them to release more money for Alex Haley. So this was as much as a story of Doubleday, because downstairs, Doubleday had started a nonfiction line that published Black history. It was books of Black interest. So there were these new novelists that were getting published. And anyway, Doubleday, there was so much happening in the world with publishing was catching up with civil rights and women's rights. So it was a fascinating period. And I was schooled in all this stuff. Well, Esther and Richard, one day they wrote a treatment for a series called Oil! Exclamation mark. Because
and what year is this?
Oh, gosh. It's got to be the 70s, because Roots came out, let's see, 77. And yeah, it's the late 70s.
Okay.
And ABC bought it, and it was going to star Angie Dickinson.
That name is something. I know that name. Angie
she was
Dickinson.
Policewoman. She was a star Policewoman. Anyway, now I'm getting off into the weeds. We'll do a whole special show on it. But
no, you're good. So we're the Shapiro's Oil. But is this at the same time as Dallas?
Pool. No, the series was Dynasty.
Right.
Dallas
so this
was already on the air.
Dallas is on the air.
And Richard said, you know what, Esther, we need to do a serial, a nighttime soap, because they knew that the creator of Dallas was a Victorian literature guy too. Yeah.
Wow. That just would never even occur to me, but I suppose I don't know much about Victorian literature.
Well, but Lorimar was doing, by this point, 8 is Enough. So they were big into these huge casts.
Okay.
For TV shows. And Leonard Katzman, who was the creator, pitched them the idea of Knots Landing, an ongoing story about a neighborhood, a suburban neighborhood. Lorimar said, nobody's going to be interested in that because it's too much like the people who watch TV. And he said, well, how about if we do it? They said, can't you do something about somebody really rich? That does. So
yeah.
He goes, well, you know what? I've got some notes about Texas and the oil industry. So they send him off, and he creates a series called Dallas about the oil industry.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a family, but it's going to be a soap opera. It's going to be serialized. He knew that was the format that people needed in television, that the Victorians knew something about storytelling, and he wanted to replicate that in TV. And
that's awesome.
So he created a brother for Gary Ewing. Gary Ewing was created long before JR.
Can I just say, and I don't mean to interrupt, I have to say, as someone coming into this brand new, I was floored when I realized that Gary Ewing was not only important, but that he was going to get the entire spinoff of Knots Landing. I would have bet my left arm that it was going to be Lucy going to the West Coast and exploring life in La La La. That's exactly what I thought. Because of what she looked like, she was the youngest, and they didn't seem to know what to do with Lucy, in my opinion. Gary had been drunk, he'd run off. Nobody said anything. By the time Gary showed up again, I was completely floored. This is incredible to me to think that he was the genesis, and then let's build this family around him. It's so crazy. Yeah.
But what happened with Dallas is it took off. So Charlene Tilton's career took off, and they could get her, she could get advertising, commercials.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it created a whole huge cast of superstars, but Dynasty that exploded around the world. Dallas was the sensation here and in England because they loved Texans, because there was a period where a lot of the nobility in England married Texas heiresses to prop up the, and see, it's all related, right? And so when the Shapiros went to 20th Century Fox, and they say, well, here's our series, Oil, and it's like Dallas, but we're going to do it somewhere else. We're going to do it in Montana or California or, somewhere. They didn't know. And then as they developed the idea, Esther's like, we should get all the big stars from the 40s that people love. The ones people know, like John Forsythe and Linda Evans from, what was her series? She was the daughter on Gunsmoke. Wait, what was it? No, I can't remember.
Something like that sounds right.
Everybody's going to yell at me and say, no, Linda Evans was on for years. Oh, she was gorgeous. Bonanza, maybe?
She's still pretty stunning.
Yeah, no, Gunsmoke, she was. And Esther said, where is that woman, right? Where's Ally McGraw from Love Story? She was going with all the people that she fell in love with in the movies. Bring them in.
That is incredible. So it was calculated.
But they tested all these people.
Okay.
But the Shapiros thought of, this is a grand, sweeping, this is not going to be Dallas. This is going to be glamorous people. And of course, in the second season, once the series had kicked off, they brought in Joan Collins.
Oh my God. Love her.
And they got a designer to start designing for the girls. And then they sent the designer, went down. Anyway, all these designers kicked around, but it was huge. And the thing was Dynasty, not Dallas. Dynasty, where it was about a rags to riches story. It was John Forsythe's story that he was a poor guy who made it big.
Right.
With his evil ex-wife, Collins. And Crystal Carrington was from a very modest background. And Crystal was a key character for the Shapiros because through her eyes, they could introduce audiences to what rich people's lives are like.
Yes.
Because John Forsythe would explain it to her.
I've always said that Dynasty has this, what do I call it? They do tend to narrate quite a bit. They do tend to explain things out loud, and I didn't realize that was why.
That was the Shapiros. It was to teach them how to be rich. What is it? What are the clothes? How do you eat? How many servants do you have? What does the house have to look like? And both Shapiros were schooled in storytellers who wrote about these huge houses and things, right?
Uh-huh.
Leonard Katzman was learning that down with Dallas, that people were more interested in the Ewings not being able to meet their mortgage payments on the ranch. That's what made the ratings go up.
When there was tension and
a real problem that people could identify. That's when viewers hooked in. That's when the ratings went through the roof. Or, whenever so it's when viewers could identify with the storyline.
Mm-hmm.
And it's when JR gambled the ranch, the ratings went through the roof, right? Okay, so let's go back to Dynasty.
This is incredible.
Right.
Yes.
So
still called oil at this point, right?
Right.
Okay.
And Dallas, behind the Iron Curtain, they're smuggling episodes of Dallas. And the Shapiros, who later did a lecture at Columbia University, I helped. They said they don't want it to be ego-driven, but they do think that Dynasty had something to do with tearing down the Iron Curtain. Once all those East Germans and Russians saw how they thought Americans lived, all the unrest started. All the unrest started. The demand for jobs, for products, for clothes, and I think they were right, because you're talking about when Dynasty came on, that was simultaneous with all of Russia starting to fall apart.
Oh my goodness.
But it was the people. It was the young people. It was anybody could get a hold of a video and see an episode. And they thought, that's where we want to live. We don't want communism.
Wow.
We don't want, to wear gray sacks, dyed burlap for material. And so that was that. Well, meanwhile, we're having all this stuff going on culturally in the country. And the creators of Dynasty, there were licensing people who sold products tied to the show. And they made money that way for the show and promoted the show. And the licensing director sold the rights for a book by the Shapiros to Doubleday, to an editor named Loretta Barrett, who was like one of the big first feminist editors and stuff. So she and Esther got along really well, because Esther was a huge feminist. And so was her husband, because they only had daughters.
Oh, it's awesome.
And the book was
due. Blake isn't.
Right. And the foreign rights department's going out with these photographs to the Frankfurt Book Fair, and they're selling rights to publish this book that Doubleday is going to publish in all these countries. And then everybody's like, Loretta, where's the book? And Loretta's like, Esther and Richard, where's the book? And they're like, what book? Because the licensing department had sold it.
Oh, man.
And the guy was too scared to tell him that, because they were so busy.
Right. I would imagine. Right.
You got to write a book for Doubleday, or my name's Mud, because I got all these publishers around the world who are waiting for it. So Loretta, who happened to be one of my bosses along the way, said, Laura, the TV woman.
Oh,
Laura, let me get you in on this call with the licensing guy. And the next thing I know, I'm flying to LA.
It's incredible.
And my assignment is to bring back a Dynasty book. They can publish like in 8 weeks.
Oh, no pressure. Wow.
Right.
No pressure.
Now, I knew it had to have a lot of pictures, because when you sell foreign rights, the less translation you had to do, the better. because the pictures you don't have to translate. But, okay, how can I explain this? The producers, the show only owned the rights to the characters and the episodes. They didn't.
Characters in the episode.
You couldn't use anything with the real life actors. So Esther's saying to me, I'm meeting them for the first time, and she goes, but we don't have rights to the actors. We can't get them to do anything for this book. Because the obvious one would be, interview the actors and do a scrapbook and do all this stuff. And I'm like, we don't have time. So
this is the perfect marriage, though. I'm getting excited.
I'm like, well, one of the best-selling books in the history of publishing was a biography of the Kennedys called A Brief Shining Moment by William Manchester. And it was the pictures. I knew it was the pictures that sold it. And I said, what about we do a book about the Carringtons like they're real people? And we'll only use the facts that you and Richard have made up in the scripts.
Okay.
And she said, oh my God, we can't even remember what we wrote, right? And the story, they had story Bibles, which are condensations of the story. Mm-hmm. But they didn't have what I needed, which were, well, where was Gary born? Not Gary, I'm sorry. Where was Crystal born? What state was she from? Blake, where did he go to college? I don't, nobody could remember. So the licensing department put me in Marilyn Monroe's trailer on the 20th Century Fox lot and brought in all the scripts of Dynasty to date, which I believe was 4 seasons or 5. And I sat there.
And that's right about where I am in the series now. Okay.
So I'm sitting with a dictaphone and I'm reading every script, speed reading. And every time, and I would flag every fictional fact they had created. Okay. So this is where Linda, not Linda Evans, it was Crystal Carrington. We talked about them like they were real people. And I would ask them, well, I don't know where did she meet Blake, right? Mm-hmm. And then they would tell me. And they would say, okay, that's in a future episode, and you'll find pictures of that at ABC. And so we had decided what we needed to do was a pictorial book, but something had to tie it together that they had the rights to.
Okay.
That they didn't have to clear it with anybody. They could just do the book.
Did you find any discrepancies, though, in your research, Laura, as you're putting together these characters? It sounds like you're putting their past together. Uh-huh. Did you notice any discrepancies?
Sure.
Was one of them that Stephen was, I don't know if you'd remember at this point, but was Stephen born first or second?
Right. Well, the actor changed, and that's why it all shifted. And I think his storyline shifted because I think there might have been a problem with the first actor playing a gay guy, I think was something.
And not to veer off.
We're absolutely set on having a gay character introducing the eye of homophobia.
Right.
And Dallas didn't want any part of it.
That makes sense.
But that's the Shapiros. That's, that was the way they were. They were these 2 hippies from the 60s who were bent on changing television.
And I pictured them so buttoned up, especially with the character of Stephen. Loved him first season. It just seemed like he was very proud. And then the next season, every time he would come out, you'd put him with hookers next, or you'd put him with, he's suddenly marrying Sammy Joe, or he's suddenly marrying,
right, he was going into the closet. Claudia. He was actually doing what rich guys do.
Okay, it just seemed weird because he was so bold, and I have to remember I'm watching this from a different lens, from a different set, but I thought one of the discrepancies from season 1 to 2 was their birth order, it seems like. I hadn't gone back to double check. Seems like they mixed that up a little bit.
So we would decide. I'd call up the Shapiros at 10 o'clock at night. There I am, still in the trailer. And I was there for 3.5 weeks. And then I would do these notes. And then they'd shoot it out to Lorimar, which was at the old MGM studios. I mean, I'm sorry. Now I'm getting mixed up. 20th Century Fox Studios. And there were a bunch of shows being done there. Eight is Enough was also a Lorimar production.
Okay.
No, I'm
and
getting it.
Lorimar does Falcon
Dallas
Crest, right?
And Knots Landing and Falcon Crest. No, I'm getting mixed up because Dynasty, it was MGM that was behind Dynasty. And the point was they had a typing pool where I could turn over a tape at 6 p.m. and at 6 a.m., the transcript of my notes was there.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I could file. Yeah, so I'm cutting all these up and I'm filing them. So I have a cohesive biography of all these characters because we got 12 characters we're doing, right? All these facts have to go somewhere. And then I would just talk to them, and we got a copywriter from the promotion department came up. And so I start telling her, okay, this is what we're writing. We got to do Blake's character because I got to go look at all these pictures of John Forsythe down at ABC. This is what I need you to write. So she did the bare bones and wrote those.
And where are we in the timeline? Because you said you had 8 weeks to
I had
get it prepared.
Right. So now we're already in 5 weeks have used up, right? But when I left LA, I had a bare bones manuscript that this copywriter had done together based on my notes and the photographs. I had the photographs that we had the rights for that I thought were really good. And I brought those home. And so I went to copy editing with the manuscript, and I worked with a copy editor, and I was rewriting everything to put it in a singular voice.
Right. Right.
And
it's awesome.
I know. And meanwhile, all my authors are twisting in the wind because I'm working on this thing.
Oh, yeah. So you're in LA the entire time for the full month and change?
Well, it's 3.5 weeks, right? But it took a week and a half for me to get out of New York to get there to do it. So I came back, and then I brought that box of photographs into the art department to our best designer who loved clothes and beautiful women, right? And beautiful men. And his name was Larry Alexander, and he designed the book because it really was the pictures that were driving it. And in 6 weeks, we had the film that we could deliver to France and Sweden and Germany and all the places that it was published. And so we did that. So I came back, and Loretta Barrett was the name of the editor. She calls me at home one night and she goes, she used to call me Boobla. Boobla. Funny thing. Do you remember that man, Danny Simon, you met? I said, yeah, he was number 2 in the licensing department. Right. Well, he just jumped to Lorimar, and he wants you to write a Dallas book because Leonard Katzman is jealous of a Dynasty book that the Shapiro's characters have a book about them.
Oh, that's awesome. Awesome.
Okay. Now, in all of this, just before I left for LA, I'll just say this. I stopped drinking.
It's a bad time to stop drinking.
No, but this was before. It was months before. And because there were things that I realized, like I hadn't written a word of my own since college. And that all my time that I would be, I was just drinking so much. I mean, it was a problem.
It was a problem.
It was a problem. Oh, yeah. Okay. And my boss at the time, Loretta, said to me, you got to do something.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Fortunately, I had an author I was very close to who took me to an AA meeting.
Oh, wow. Okay.
She knew. So anyway, a long story short, when I went out to Dynasty, I was sober. And I'm working on this creative thing, and I'm feeling great because my mind's clear for the first time in, God, I don't know how many years. And I got the bug again. Just
once the alcohol had left.
But once I started writing Dynasty, making it into a book, all that was coming back. And I started writing a short story about an anchor woman one night, just like the old days. I had to write it. And I started that. And it was bad because I knew I wanted to be a writer more than, and if I was going to be sober, if I wasn't going to drink, I had to do something that I'd rather do.
Yeah. And do you think, Laura, that and I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm just curious as you say that. I know a lot of creatives, drink. There's usually a little bit of a vice.
It goes
alongside
along.
That.
Writing itself is a process of self-hypnosis. You have to go into another world and write so well that I can take you with me.
Right. Yeah.
That can be very daunting because the real world becomes a very harsh world to live in.
Right. Do you think being at Doubleday surrounded by books and authors, sort of knowing in the back of your mind that's what you really wanted to do?
Well,
do you think
the thing is that I knew all these years that when I started drinking as a kid in junior high, it's because I didn't want to be awkward going through adolescence.
Yeah.
I felt very homely. So I always drank at social occasions. So everybody thought, oh, Laura has all these social skills. No, I didn't.
Just liquid courage.
But
I get that, though.
Exactly.
I get it.
But Lorimar hired me to write a Dallas book. So suddenly I could have an income while I learned how to write a novel and how to live sober.
Two very sort of life-changing moments at the same time. That's got to be difficult to navigate.
So the poor mailman, when, 7 years of scripts arrived at my little apartment in New York, and he had to carry them up 3 flights of stairs.
Wow.
So I started working on the Knots Landing book. And the Dallas book, because that was the big one. And I got to meet Leonard Katzman, and reading his work, I understood where he was coming from. And yes, he was like the Shapiros. He too was a fan of great, serialized storytelling. He understood that. And
that's what it's all about.
He always was mad because it took him the Mortgage series in Dallas to get it. The people had to identify. And so he had this impossible task of bringing along the weak sister, which was Knots Landing, which wasn't so obvious. So he's bringing Dallas to meet the viewers, and he's bringing Knots Landing to educate them and create millionaires and do what the Shapiros did and take Karen and make her a tight, they're switching. They had to see the suburbs, those people start succeeding.
Okay. And that's very interesting because Dallas and Dynasty, this is wealth already established. You just need to maintain it. So where Dynasty teaches the audience how to be rich, Knots Landing is showing them
themselves. People identified with of having kids and all the headaches and stuff. But what happened then over time was Dallas started to have some problems about bringing people back as actors. Knots Landing, those characters were growing, and I'm not going to do a spoiler, but it's like Abby, who is changing very fast, and so did the trajectory of Knots Landing's ratings. It took off with Abby, the way the Dynasty took off with Joan Collins, right?
Okay, I can see that.
Joan Van Ark and Karen and what's Joan Van Ark's?
Valine.
Were very popular characters. Valine, particularly in the South. And
love me some Valine.
Yeah. And she became a bridge. She became the Crystal Carrington of Knots Landing to explain things as time went on. But viewers, and what would happen is that the audience for Knots Landing would eventually become, in some ways, much bigger and much more solid and much more commercial than Dallas ever was. Because
really,
it went on for 14 years.
Yeah. So at this time, would you say Dallas, as you're writing the book, and Dynasty, they're both very popular at this point, right?
Yes.
Did you feel extra pressure because of that?
No, not at all, because I understood the creators. And the creators lived in a territory that I understood. Because Conan Doyle was he's been dead for a million years, but the Sherlock Holmes stories were published in America, the collections by Doubleday. And I actually I was his editor because you had to take care of the backlist, all the old titles that continued to sell and you'd have to rejacket them and stuff. And I realized that he was serialized in the Cornhill magazine because he was a Victorian writer. And things just started clicking in my head about all this stuff is related. So when I wrote my first novel, which ended up being Riverside Drive, it was very heavily influenced by Knots Landing and Dynasty and Dallas, because the storyline was 6 households where something happened to the cleaning lady. This is in Manhattan.
Oh, that's a good one.
Something happened to her. The neighbors met each other for the first time, and the neighborhood was never the same again.
I think I bought that one. I'm currently listening to your podcast, but then I bought,
there's only Benedict Canyon, I think it's on audio.
Right now. Benedict Canyon is, that's a whole I'm listening story. To that one.
Yeah.
Right.
That is.
But the other one I'm on.
Right. That's a standalone book. Those characters that are in Benedict Canyon come back in many novels. Many of them that's in there has already appeared in 1, 2, 3 novels, I think. But there's a whole publishing story behind that, and my accident and all that stuff has to do with. So we're just going to have to keep talking again and again. What are you doing tomorrow?
We definitely will. I did purchase Riverside Drive is on my Kindle.
Oh, good. That's a very good book.
Okay.
And that's the one that's very heavily influenced by the nighttime soaps, to the point that
wonderful.
When Donna Mills was leaving Knots Landing, after a while, the character left for a while because Donna was producing her own TV stuff. She optioned Riverside Drive.
Oh, no way. Friends?
Having no idea that the editor of the Knots Landing book was my editor at Doubleday. And that's when we met each other for the first time. And that became.
Wow. Did I hear that right? Abby freaking Cunningham optioned Riverside Drive? That's so cool to me. I'm loving the crossover. I'm hoping you are enjoying this conversation with the one and only Laura Van Wormer. We're going to pick up where we left off in a couple episodes. We're going to get back to our regularly scheduled programming. I think it's time that we look at Donna Mills for a little bit. So let's see what's going on Knots Landing. I want to thank you guys for joining me on this special episode. Don't forget to send me a text. Let me know what you thought of the show. Send me a voicemail. Send me an email. Send a voicemail or text via the show note. Send us a text link. There's also a send me a voicemail link. If you prefer to write out your thoughts, if you want to be a little creative today, go for it. I love reading. You can reach me at soaplorepodcast@gmail.com. That's soaplorepodcast@gmail.com. If you want to check out her podcast, it is available wherever podcasts are. Class of 74 is a real good time. Stay hydrated, stay moisturized, mind your own business, and keep all of your drama on TV.